Okay, Zvezdin, thank you very much for joining me on the Security Space podcast today. What we will be discussing is a safe or anonymous internet, and it's quite an ambiguous title, but I'm sure we'll get into it in a second. But yes, are you okay just to give the audience a little bit of a background to yourself, if that's okay?
Absolutely. Thank you for inviting me. So, hey everyone, I'm Zvezdin. I'm a 23-year-old founder of the company called Audit.io, which is focused on solving the dilemma between how can you make the internet safer while also keeping the privacy and anonymity in place as well. Before that, I spent a lot of time on more privacy/cybersecurity sided work, both in terms of research when it comes to blockchain and building centralized alternatives to other applications, and also in terms of finding ways to create more secure systems. And so privacy and security has always been a pet passion of mine. For example, I've always tried to find private alternatives to Gmail or Google Drive or any of the tools that we use, which provide a lot of convenience, but come with a little bit of a hidden cost, which might show up down the road if, let's say, the company you're trusting your data with either ends up trying to sell it to someone for your loss, or actually is not very careful with it and it gets leaked. And so I try not to trust other like infrastructure providers way too much. And that's slowly but surely the path that led me to my current venture.
Amazing. Thank you very much for that, Zvezdin. So, yes, so let's get into it. I know that it, like I say, it's a bit of an ambiguous title with a safe or anonymous internet. So I'm going to just start off with a very, very broad question. What is the current state of play of the internet?
I don't know. What is the current state of play on the internet from your perspective?
From my perspective, God, it's a scary place at the moment. I think with AI at the moment, it's scary but exciting, but it's full of risks as well. So obviously, the angle of the question that I was going for is how have we kind of got here in terms of cyber warfare, in terms of artificial intelligence, in terms of Gen AI as well. How have we got here? Is it a good place to be? Is it a bad place to be? What's your sort of thoughts on that?
Right. So it's very much hotly debated topic right now. It has a lot to do with, for example, social media and how its use has grown and how its potential misuse has grown. And what we've seen over the years is that technology is an enabler of new opportunities, but also enabler of new fraud patterns or new ways to create or steal or manipulate populations in some way or form. Because our minds haven't changed all too much since we were in a village where we weren't overloaded with information and we could more easily trust the people we're interacting with. But now it has transitioned to a completely different environment. And so that technology is very easily abusable by various actors. I think all of you are very well aware of how much spam there is online. That's, we can call it relatively innocent, but it's also embarrassingly easy to see how someone can create a very large social movement out of thin air.
Yep.
For example, I think in the UK we have a very relevant example right now where an incident happened, a very bad incident happened. In the police didn't release information about what the perpetrator was, but out of nowhere, people started spreading fake news that this perpetrator is from Islamic heritage and they're a refugee or asylum seeker, et cetera, et cetera. And we had a huge outlash of protests across the country. And this all came from just a couple of posts. I think one of the sources pointed out was a Russian media account controlled by a Russian media outlet.
Yep.
And so it's super easy to create this because I can just create 10,000 accounts and just pretend to be anyone I want, and these accounts can interact with each other and they can like each other and they can post content, and with now with generative AI, it will be even more human looking. So it's really easy to mimic human behavior online is what I'm wrapping up to. And because our minds work based on volume, the more of the same we see, the more we believe it. And because it's really easy to recreate volume in the digital world, it's kind of really easy thing to abuse.
Yeah. So with that being said, then, do you think that the cons are outweighing the pros at this moment in time? Then,
I don't think I know enough to answer this question very confidently. However, we certainly should be doing a lot more about the cons, because I'm currently worried because I'm not seeing a lot of regulatory push from either the EU or the US to do much about this, to regulate internet platforms. And I'm not saying, break the monopolies or anything outrageous like that, but just put the appropriate safeguards in place to make sure that people are not being, to make sure it's not so easy and cheap to abuse people online. And if it doesn't come from the regulators, I'm also not seeing the incentive for the companies to integrate this, because bots usually don't transfer to negative consequences for the bottom line of the company. Sometimes it's actually rather the opposite, because it is sometimes an increase in engagement, it keeps people on your platform, etc., etc. And so it's a relatively tough nut to crack. But I do believe that with the rise of AI and with the rise of all the large scale attacks that we're seeing, platforms would see it as largely an inevitable protection to have, because we can only ignore it up to some point. At some other point, our platform just becomes notorious for being full of scammers and bots and stuff, which Twitter, or X right now, is slightly, let's say, pivoting in that direction, at least from my circles. Just as an example, I don't know if you're an avid user of Twitter, but there's just a lot of crap out there, and it seems that there was a lot. It seems that has increased a lot more in recent years, and so that might create a natural incentive for them to try to fix that problem eventually.
I was reading a document a few days ago. I think, don't quote me on this, but I think it was like the lead tech analyst for the S&P, and he was saying that my angle of question is around the amount of money that's being invested into AI at this moment, and it is absolutely, yeah, like deceiving on the eyes to how much money is getting pumped into AI startups and just AI investments, AI platforms, whatever it might be. Throw AI in it, they're getting millions and trillions of pounds thrown at it, the whole sector. Now, this analyst said that there is the possibility that this could be like the tech bubble that happened obviously in 2000s, well, the late 90s, early 2000s, when that popped. And he's saying that there is the potential that this could happen too, because like you say, there's no regulations in place. It's a little bit like the Wild West at the moment is AI. What's your view? Do you think that this AI bubble could pop, or do you think it's here to stay and you just can't escape it?
I don't think I'm the right person to be asked for investment advice, because if you look at it historically,
Yep.
every time I tried to time the market, I went so much in the wrong direction that I've basically, my investment experience has been just donating money to the stock market at this point. It's like it's just charity to other people, to other shareholders at this point. But so it's really hard to foresee things, like it was really hard to foresee the Eurozone crisis and et cetera, et cetera. So I do think that every time when there is a gigantic, really, 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 really fast surge, and it's not backed up by fundamentals relatively soon, that's a cause for concern. Whether that applies to the situation, I think maybe in some part, I do expect to see some sort of correction, because I have seen how quite a few companies had managed to raise funds without really providing much value or differentiation. So maybe there's something to it, but I probably wouldn't be expecting a .com crash level,
Yep.
because we're also not seeing a .com level gains right now.
Yep.
But either way, it still builds a lot of technology which could be abused eventually. And I think many people are rightfully raising money to create amazing tools.
Yep.
I would like to see more tools to prevent some of the attack vectors enabled by this instrument as well.
Yeah. So just to, because that was a slight diversion, so just to bring it back onto track then. Obviously, we're talking about safety and anonymity on the internet. What what does your product do? What does Outdid do, and how is that contributing to safety and anonymity online?
So the whole idea is, how can we verify that people are humans, meaning they're not AI agents, they are not someone behind 10,000 accounts, they are all just genuine humans, and genuine humans have one account, maybe two, but they don't really have that much more. How can you do that without compromising anonymity? Because that's a big challenge here. If it was easier, everyone would do it, right? But if you compromise anonymity, you're moving from one extreme to the other. From one extreme being complete freedom and anonymity, which of course comes with danger and fraud. The other extreme being complete and authoritarian control and trust of central actors. Because the moment you reveal the identities of everyone online, that gives the power to the regulators, to the internet platforms, to the companies to allow or deny people access to certain online resources or to do whatever they please with them, which is not what we want either. So how do you pick between the two? Because usually, if you want to verify someone being a human, you got to see something about them.
Yep.
I got to see maybe your face, your ID card, something to show me that, hey, Nick is actually a human. He's not pretending to be two humans, three humans. He's just Nick.
Yep. And my very naive view of it must be that you can't ever get 100% anonymity. Yeah, there has to be a degree of flexibility in this. I might be wrong. There might be far smarter brains than me that can understand this, but at some point there has to be that human sense where, like, okay, we need to actually see you, or like you say, I know that there's other ways of doing it. Like, for example, I've just had to do sort of, I got a tax refund, and then they needed certain information from me, like such as that certain data to prove my identity that's unique to me. Now, that in itself, like, I'm publishing sort of data about myself, whether it be, yeah, like you say, like sensitive data, but they still needed. There is that I'm still putting that data out there to be exposed online. So, is there a degree of flexibility where, like, okay, we can get it 97% secure, but it'll never be 100%, or are we fighting sort of a losing battle where it's a bit of a double-edged sword?
Well, perfection is the enemy of execution, right? So inherently, it's impossible to maintain 100% anonymity, because everything you do online, even whether I bought shoes or an
Yep.
iPhone, tells you something about me already. And that's why
Yep.
data is so powerful, because it's really hard to not have data. It's really hard to not give away data. And so I think that the threshold where it becomes more serious is whenever the actual human can be identified with a single piece of information, by whether this is a passport number or some sort of anonymous identifier that then can point to you in some way, shape, or form. Then that becomes a bit more dangerous, if that identifier is then, Google tells Apple, hey, this user with this unique identifier did this bad thing. And
Yep.
then now Apple also will disallow you to have an account, for example. And that is what we want to avoid. Because it gives too much power to other people. And of course, when you give too much power to someone, eventually someone in a bad position of power would come and abuse that somewhere. Right? You can't really trust single points of failure, I think, especially when it comes to security and reliability and internet freedoms and all that stuff. And so
Yep.
we're looking at how can we remove the direct link between you and your human status.
Yep.
Because if you can do that, you're golden.
Yep.
Right? And there's a whole landscape of new technologies which have been tasked to solve this problem. We're only working on one of these solutions, but all these require improvements and really big advancements in the field of privacy in general. Because they basically allow things that, if you tell that to let's say an outsider of that field, they would just call that magic, right?
Yep.
For example, how can I if I have this passport, how can I prove to you decisively? How can I decisively prove to you that this passport is valid, but you don't even see which country it's from? I haven't even opened it, and
Yep.
I can decisively prove to you that it's valid, and you don't have to trust me for this. For example, it
Yeah.
sounds like magic, right? Doesn't
Yeah.
it? So there's all kinds of really cool technologies being developed to address that problem.
Yep.
And some of them are being some of them are called zero knowledge proofs or
Yep.
multi-party computation, for example, which all allow us to process private data without showing it in some way. So it allows someone, like a company, for example, to be able to work with private data without seeing it to begin with.
Yep.
And it's really cool stuff, actually. Also quite hard to understand, mathematically speaking, because it requires a lot of elliptic curve mathematics and all that good stuff.
Yep.
But as a concept, it's actually not too hard to get. If you just put it in a magic box and say, this is just how it works. This is just how
Yeah.
zero knowledge proofs work. So I'm happy to give you a couple of examples. For example, again, with this passport, let's say that, let's say that I've got this magic box, which is called
Yep.
a zero knowledge prover. It takes my passport and it outputs a proof. Now that proof doesn't contain the passport itself,
Yep.
but it contains just enough information for you when I give it to you to be ensured that this passport is valid, for example. And this is cool stuff because that passport never has to leave me or my hands.
Yeah.
And now you know I have a valid passport.
Yep.
And that this passport is unique, and this is the first time you've seen this passport, for example. And so you can verify I'm a human.
Yep.
But oh, that's all you know.
It's phenomenal. It's scary, but it's phenomenal.
Scary.
Honestly, yeah. So it petrifies me, but it excites me that we're living in this time, and like even just the advancements that we've made in AI, even just in the last sort of 5 years, is phenomenal. Did you see that interview? Donald Trump were involved in it, and it was someone sort of like it was an AI version, and he had to check like, did I actually say that? Because it was that real, and that's what's the more scary part is the fact that we have world leaders that are being sort of deep faked, and they don't know if they've said these things, and they have to clarify it. And the way that, like you say, Twitter and other media outlets control a lot of society's decision making, and their exposure is scary. And AI, how that impacts sort of the wider society to people who aren't necessarily in the inner circles of understanding cyber, AI, data security, whatever it might be, will just take it at face value and be like, oh, Donald Trump said something really extreme, and then this causes wide mass problems. And this is what's the scary thing. Do you think that we'll, again, going back to our first point that we made at the start of the podcast, do you think that there'll be regulations that eventually come in that can detect, like, okay, that's fake, that straight away when that gets surfaced, that's fake? Or do you think it's too mature to chase its tail at this point?
So the problem, the fundamental problem of determining whether something is AI generated or not, I think is a really, really hard to win cat and mouse game.
Yep.
Simply because it's not hard to see how just AI gets better and better and better. And so what are you going to detect at some points? Like it's pretty much indecipherable from reality.
Yeah.
And so you got to take a different approach.
Yep.
You got to ask yourself, where did that video come from? For example, did it come from an authentic camera?
Yep.
Can I verify the camera that produced this? Can I verify that this was produced by this camera sensor without modification? So we should add trust points on other parts of the information chain. So that's the actual source of information, for example, the camera. There's technologies being developed and also live right now, which allow cameras, for example, to sign the output.
Yep.
So they've got a little tiny trusted module inside of them, which authenticates and like certifies that yeah, this video came out of me. And so now you have to trust the camera company, but that's a lot better than trusting nothing, right?
Yep.
And so, and then the other layer that you can work with is verifying the content from the place it's posted from the account level. Is this a human, right? It doesn't tell you whether this is an AI video or not, but most likely if it's a human, I can only post so much, and chances are it's probably going to be real. And if it's not real, then all I can do is make maybe 10 fake posts. I can't make 10,000, right? Because the platform will just block me. Like you'll tell me, bro, what are you doing?
Yeah.
So we need to add trust at different levels of where information is shared. Without this, I probably would prefer to live in a cave at this point. I'm not joking, because it ain't going well. It ain't going well. I think this will most effectively be applied through regulations, because it can then set a standard of how let's say all the different camera companies would certify the content in the same way, so that the Twitter can more easily verify with just one way, or vice versa. So I'm hopeful that we'll get some standards in place. Otherwise, it'll be pretty hard, because you have maybe like some platforms only some cameras will be able to do this, and then platforms won't support it because it's not everywhere, et cetera, et cetera. So it's quite hard to roll it out through network effects.
Yep.
Whether that happens, I don't know. I'm not a regulator.
Yep.
But I should certainly hope so.
Yeah. No, really interesting point. And look, I can't believe obviously we've already pretty much got to the end of the podcast. But I always like to sort of end on pretty much the same question. When I speak to founders such as yourself, is obviously Outdid. They're a company that specialise in identity access management, which obviously is very important when it comes to authentication tools. And like you say, in the world of AI, it's absolutely crucial. Now, with that being said, is there any advice that you would give to yourself, perhaps a younger self that was starting 5-6 years ago, maybe even less? We're like, look, I made these mistakes, don't do them, or encourage your mistakes. That's how you ended up here. Just give me a bit of a reflection on your journey to this point and how you got to basically being a founder of your own company.
Oh, quite a lot, quite a lot. Because there's a famous saying which says that no matter how much you teach an entrepreneur what mistakes to avoid, they'll make them anyways, because they're gonna think they can do better than that, because that's required for you to be an entrepreneur. And so you tell me you can't do that, and I'll show you I can do it. And so there's quite a lot. But I think it's really important to make sure you always take action, even if you think you don't have enough time and resources to make it good enough. I think finding the perfectionist mindset is really, really important, and something that I started this company with the intention that I won't be perfectionist, and realizing I was quite a bit of that in certain moments.
Yeah.
And so just, for example, constantly reflecting, hey, we spent 1 month on this product or on this product feature. Did you really need to spend that much? And how can you spend 1 month in building a product without going to the market and talking to customers about it? Because, otherwise, what are you doing? And so that's super crucial. The second point, I think that was hugely impactful for us, is hiring. And that's picking the right fits, but not in terms of skills.
Yep.
But in terms of emotional level of emotional development and level of emotional awareness, which is not something I'm seeing being very emphasized out there in entrepreneurship advice in general. We're all talking about hiring A players, hiring best performance, et cetera, and that's great. But sometimes if someone hasn't developed enough emotional maturity, they'll get in a conflict situation eventually. The sunshine and rainbow days eventually end, and sometimes a conflict appears. That's inevitable. And when the conflict appears, you see who that person is in reality. Because when things are great, there's nothing nothing too different to show. When money has to be involved, when we have to talk about serious decisions which personally could affect someone, then they show their real self.
Yep.
And we've had pretty big losses on that front, which wasted months of development effort, et cetera, or various different challenges, because we realized that just some people weren't that well intentioned, or weren't even aware that they were not that very well intentioned. Like they
Yep.
thought they were trying to do a good thing, but in reality their ego was activating too much.
Yep.
And they were destroying more things.
Nice, good feedback. So that brings us pretty much to our time. I know we've touched on some pretty hard-hitting subjects there. So if anybody has got any questions for us, Zvezdin, or would like to learn more about what Outdid do, I'll be sure to put all the information down below. But once again, Zvezdin, thank you very much for coming on the podcast.
Thank you for inviting.